Have you ever wondered how much you should really be saving in your emergency fund? Well, trust me, you're not alone. For many of us, the concept of an emergency fund can be a bit daunting. It's like a financial safety net. But how big should that net be? An emergency fund is essentially a stash of money set aside to cover the financial surprises life throws your way. These unexpected events can be stressful, and without a financial safety net, they can lead to debt or financial instability. Everyone needs an emergency fund because, let's face it, life is full of unexpected surprises. Now, the size of your emergency fund can vary. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. It depends on your personal circumstances, like your monthly expenses and financial obligations. It's a balancing act, really. Stick around to understand how to calculate the perfect amount for your emergency fund. It's time to turn that financial uncertainty into financial confidence. Why exactly do we need an emergency fund? Let's dive in and explore the answer to this question. Life, as we know it, is full of uncertainties. You might have heard this a million times, and it's true. One day, you're sailing smoothly, and the next, you're hit with an unexpected storm. These storms can be anything, from a sudden job loss, a medical emergency, or an unforeseen major expense. Imagine this. You're thriving in your career, your paycheck is regular, and everything is going as planned. Suddenly, you're handed a pink slip. Losing a job, especially when you least expect it, can be a massive blow. It's not just about the emotional stress, but the financial strain that comes along with it. In such situations, an emergency fund can be the lifeboat that keeps you afloat while you find another job. Or consider another scenario, a sudden health crisis. We all know that medical emergencies don't knock on your door before arriving. They can be daunting, not just physically, but also financially. Medical bills can quickly stack up, turning an already stressful situation into a financial nightmare. But with an emergency fund in place, you can focus on recovery rather than worrying about how you're going to pay the bills. Then there are those unexpected expenses that life throws at you. It could be anything from a broken down car to a leaking roof. When these unforeseen costs pop up, they can throw your entire budget out of whack. But if you have an emergency fund set aside, you can handle these expenses without breaking a sweat. An emergency fund, in essence, is a buffer between you and life's unexpected turns. It's your financial safety net, providing you with the peace of mind that you can weather whatever financial storms come your way. It's not about being pessimistic and expecting the worst, but rather about being prepared and financially resilient. So, why exactly do we need an emergency fund? Because it's the financial parachute that can save us from free-falling into a sea of debt and financial stress. An emergency fund is your financial safety net. But how big should this net be? Let's find out in the next scene. So, how much money should you ideally have in your emergency fund? This is a question that often leaves many scratching their heads. The answer, however, isn't as complex as you might think. The general rule of thumb suggests having 3 to 6 months' worth of living expenses tucked away in your emergency fund. Sounds simple, right? But it's important to remember that living expenses encompass everything from your rent or mortgage, utilities, groceries, transportation costs, and even those unexpected expenses that seem to pop up out of nowhere. However, this isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. Your personal circumstances play an integral part in determining the ideal amount for your emergency fund. Let's discuss some of these factors that might influence how much you need to save. First, consider your job security. If you're in a field with high turnover or if your income is largely commission-based, you might want to aim for a larger safety net, say closer to 6 months' worth of expenses. On the other hand, if your job is relatively stable, you might be comfortable with a smaller cushion. The number of income sources is another major factor. If you have multiple streams of income, you might not need as large an emergency fund. But if you're reliant on a single source, a hefty emergency fund can provide peace of mind. Lastly, let's not forget about dependents. If you're responsible for the financial well-being of others, whether that's children, elderly parents, or anyone else, you may need a larger emergency fund to cover unexpected costs. So, there we have it. While 3 to 6 months' worth of living expenses is a good starting point, your personal circumstances will ultimately determine the ideal size of your emergency fund. It's all about striking the right balance between what you can afford to save and what would give you peace of mind in case of an unexpected financial setback. Now that you know how much to save, let's figure out where to keep this money. You've got the cash, but where should you stash it? Now that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? we've determined the importance of an emergency fund and how much to save. Now let's dive into where to keep this fund so it's both easily accessible and secure. Firstly, the key is to keep these funds separate from your daily checking account. Why? Well, out of sight, out of mind, right? You're less likely to dip into your emergency savings when they aren't readily available. Now let's talk about a few options. One great place to park your emergency fund is in a high-yield savings account. These accounts often offer higher interest rates than your average savings account, meaning your money will grow over time. And the best part? Your fund remains easily accessible and you can withdraw at any time without a penalty. Another option is a money market account. This is a type of savings account that usually requires a higher minimum balance, but offers a higher interest rate in return. Some money market accounts even come with check writing privileges, which could come in handy during an emergency. Lastly, let's discuss short-term CDs, or certificates of deposit. These are time deposits held at a bank with a specific fixed term. While these often offer higher interest rates than savings accounts, they're a bit less accessible. You may face a penalty for early withdrawal. So if you're considering this option, it's best to keep a portion of your emergency fund in a more liquid account too. Remember, your emergency fund needs to be somewhere safe, where the value isn't going to fluctuate much. It's not about growing this money or making big returns. It's about having a safety net. So weigh your options, consider the pros and cons, and choose the best place for your emergency fund that aligns with your financial situation and comfort level. Now that we know where to keep it, how do we go about building this fund? Well, stay tuned, because that's exactly what we're going to discuss next. Building an emergency fund might seem daunting, but it's simpler than you think. It's a journey that starts with a single step and continues with consistency and discipline. Let's break it down into manageable chunks, shall we? The first step is setting a monthly savings goal. This could be based on a percentage of your income. A popular strategy is the 10% rule, where you set aside 10% of your income each month. But don't feel pressured to stick rigidly to this. Adjust the percentage according to what works best for you. The important part is to consistently contribute to your fund every month, no matter how small the amount. Next, consider using windfalls to boost your emergency fund. A windfall is a large amount of money that you receive unexpectedly, like a bonus at work, a tax refund, or an inheritance. Instead of spending it on a splurge, consider putting a portion or even all of it into your emergency fund. This can significantly speed up your savings journey. Also, it's worth taking a look at your monthly expenses and identifying areas where you can cut back. These savings can then be redirected to your emergency fund. Do you really need that subscription to the gym you hardly ever visit? Or could you maybe cut back on dining out and cook more meals at home? Remember, every little bit helps. As you start building your emergency fund, it's crucial to keep track of your progress. Regularly review your savings and adjust your strategy as needed. This will not only keep you motivated, but also ensure that you're on track to reach your savings goal. Finally, remember that building an emergency fund isn't a race. It's a journey towards financial security. Don't be disheartened if progress seems slow. Every step you take brings you closer to your goal. And there you have it, a comprehensive guide to building and maintaining your emergency fund. So take that first step today, and before you know it, you'll have a safety net that gives you peace of mind and financial freedom. Before we wrap up, let's quickly recap what we've learned today. We've discussed the critical role an emergency fund plays in financial stability. We've explored how to determine the right amount to save, usually 3 to 6 months of living expenses. We've also examined the best places to keep your fund, like high-yield savings accounts for easy access. Lastly, we've shared some practical tips on how to start building or optimizing your emergency fund. Remember, a well-stocked emergency fund is key to financial security. Start building yours today.